today, you guys, we are talking about sciatica.
Sciatica.
We're talking about sciatica, which is the real pain in the butt, right? We talk about getting on my last nerve. All right, nerve pain. Let's talk about that. We have all had some nerve pain in our lifetime, yeah?
Oh, yes.
It seems like this week we have a lot of clients right now that are all suffering from a lot of nerve pain.
There's a lot of it going around, yes.
And a lot of it is because we go from periods of doing a lot of sitting and a lot of sedentary kind of movements where we're not doing anything to all of a sudden feeling like we have to pick up a lot of stuff or doing movements or things that we're just not ready for. And if our body isn't accustomed to doing it, or we move too fast on certain things, or gosh, it could be anything. We overload our body on one thing and then reach for something in the fridge. The body just seems to, boop, all of a sudden, this is the story we always get. I didn't do anything. And then all of a sudden, bam, pain down my leg, into my butt, down my foot, on the top of my foot, in the back of my calf, and it burns and it tingles and it just kills me.
There are so many reasons why that's coming up right now. Just stress alone and people doing a lot more sitting. That's going to be the number one.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So let's talk about sciatica. The nerves, we have this whole central nervous system, right? We're going to start there. Sciatica is an actual sciatic nerve, and it runs in a very specific place. First and foremost, you can only get sciatica on the lower half of your body. You can't have sciatica coming down your arm. You can't have sciatica coming across into your neck, into your upper back. It's the sciatic nerve. So all of the nerves in our central nervous system, the way our body works is Scully, scoot over. And we're going to show you Mr. Scully right here. If you notice, he has this skull, and then at the base of his skull, he has this vertebrae. In between those vertebrae is your spinal cord, right? And so as the vertebrae come out, what you'll see on majority of skeletons, if you look, these little yellow tabs, let's just say, for fear of not having anything else to say right now, they come out of each nerve root that comes out from in between each of the vertebrae, and they actually pop out and innervate the arms, the back, the low back, the legs, and down. Each section, which is called your cervical plexus, your brachial plexus, your lumbar plexus, your sacral plexus, each of these plexi have different levels of nerves that are attached to it. So if you have pain that is coming down into your arm, it'll be from your cervical plexus and one of these nerves that is usually compressed or pinched or entrapped somehow, either via bulging disc or posturally or muscularly, all different types. So if you notice, we'll have nerves that come all the way down. The sciatic nerve. Let's talk about that because that is a big, big nerve. First of all, it starts between, this is your lower lumbar. This is where your lumbar starts, L1 to L5, right? And then S, this is where your sacrum hits. So if you ever hear the verb L is for lumbar, and it's L1, L2, L3, L4, L5. And then sacrum is, well, S1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even though it's fused, that's how it's still spoken about, okay? So you want L3, 1, 2, 3, to S3. So from here to here, you have the nerves that pop out of your lower back into your sacrum. That one is where your sciatic nerve lays. So it comes in, it is the largest nerve in the body. Now the sciatic nerve, the
trunk of the nerve?
No, yeah, the trunk of the nerve, it's big. It's about the size of my pinky. And so it's not a really thin nerve. It's a really thick guy. And so what it's doing is it's coming out from the lower part of your back, coming from the nerve root right in here, in between the vertebrae, and then it follows and travels all the way through around your pelvis. It comes underneath the glutes right here, the piriformis, underneath it specifically, and then travels down into the leg. Now what the sciatic nerve does is it innervates the hamstrings and the adductors. So that means when the nervous system innervates it, it sends signals down to that part so that you can actually contract and have movement. Yeah. So it always is talking back and forth and back and forth. And then what happens with the sciatic nerve is it comes from the low back, it travels down into the butt. A lot of people feel butt pain. That is usually that sciatic nerve getting active. And then it goes down into the back of the hamstring. And then right around the knee area, the back of the knee, it splits into two branches. And so it splits off into the tibial, which is where the tibia is. It hits this tibial nerve, and then it hits this peroneal nerve, which is the outside. So we have that fibula, the big tib, little fib, the little fibula. The peroneal nerve sits on the outside, the lateral side of the leg. The tibia will come down and hit into the front of the foot, right here, usually. The peroneal will come down and hit to the back of the ankle a lot of the time, or that right into the heel. It is a long, long nerve. I mean, it goes all the way from your back to your foot. And so people will happen to have sciatic pain. It doesn't mean that it's going to actually run the entire length of the leg. A lot of times depending on where it gets compressed and the nerve root gets compressed, it'll jump into different places.
So that's why when a lot of people come in, when somebody says they have pain and they may say I have sciatic pain, well, we'll ask specifically, where do you feel that pain? Where is it showing up for you? And that helps us differentiate what part of the nerve root is being impinged, potentially if it's a nerve root, or where along the pathway it is being impinged.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be at the nerve root.
Yeah. Now the sciatic nerve, I mean, it's got a resting length of 3 feet.
Yeah, we took out my sciatic nerve. That's
long.
mine right there.
This is how long it is. It is so long when it's in here. It's going all the way down, and so it gets sandwiched between sheets of like muscle and fascia. And now fascia is wrapped around every single muscle fiber, every single muscle bundle, every single group of muscles. It is a huge network of connection between muscles and nerves. So you have to have both. And so the nerves get squished right in between. They glide and they move right in between all of that muscle and fascia. So sometimes you'll have direct pressure on one of the nerves, either from the back, where you'll have direct pressure from the back, or you can have direct pressure that's coming from the muscle getting too tight and contracting and entrapping that nerve. Some of the symptoms of sciatica and sciatic pain are shooting pain, that sharp shooting pain where you're just like, oh, it's so painful. So it could be numbness. There could be tingling. There could be that pins and needles pain. It's intermittent. Sometimes you'll feel it when you're only sitting. Sometimes when you're only standing. Sometimes it feels like that ghost pain where you're just like, oh, I can't really pinpoint it, but God, it hurts so much, and it's just like that. I can't even explain it. It's like that dead pain where you're just like, it's just achy all the time. It's
sometimes
so
you get burning
achy.
pain. You get a burning sensation.
Yeah, and burning as well. And it's really a common type of pain. It affects anything from the lower back down to each leg. This is not necessarily just one leg or the other, because the sciatic nerve breaks off and goes down both legs bilaterally. It doesn't just go down one side.
It typically will only affect one side, typically.
Yeah.
Not always.
It depends. It really depends on what's going on with you. So typical symptoms of sciatica include lower back pain. So if you're having lower back pain chronically over and over and over again, you can actually create some sciatic pain from that. You can have pain in the your rear end, or your leg, that it's worse when it's sitting than when it's standing.
Pressing right on it, yep.
Yeah, where you're sitting right on it. You can have hip pain into the side of your hip. You can have the burning and tingling down your leg, like we just spoke about. You can have weakness or numbness or a hard time moving the leg and the foot. That's a one to really watch out for. If there is weakness or numbness where you actually can't move, or you can't stand on your toes or your heels,
Get back on your heels,
that is one where you get to call the doctor like right away. You can have, go ahead.
I was just saying another big one to watch out for is if you lose bladder control.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
That's immediately go in and
Yeah.
get checked out.
Constant pain on one side or the rear. One side. That's going to be part of it too. Or a shooting pain that makes it so hard to stand up. And anybody who's had it knows that it is like debilitating.
Brutal.
Debilitating. So, can you have sciatic pain without back pain? Because a lot of times people will think
absolutely.
we'll only be able to have it from back pain.
You can have it just in your shin, right in the front of your leg. You can have it showing up. And it can be nowhere else but right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why we can have this. Here's one of the biggest things. Oh, let me get this guy back. Okay, because it goes from L3 to S3, we have all of these spinal nerve roots that come in. What we also have in the front of here are these big vertebrae. And these big vertebrae, if we flip you around to the front, you'll notice that there's a lot of discs in the front. So in the front of these, in between these vertebrae, you'll have your intervertebral bodies. The discs, intervertebral discs are sitting in there, right? They take the impact, they take the compression, they disperse the weight. So if these are degenerating, we have the bodies of the discs that are degenerating, and so what happens is these discs are filled with water, right, synovial fluid, and they start to aspirate, meaning they lose their liquid, and you lose the space in between the disc. The bodies, the bones of these vertebrae actually drop onto one another in the front, and then they also drop onto it in the back as well, and so they start to pinch off that spinal nerve root. The other thing too is if you have, like this guy is in red right here, if you have this issue right here, this is a bulging disc. This is where more pressure is put on one side than the other, and it starts to really push out that disc to where it starts to bulge out, and it'll sit on one of the nerve roots as well, and that can lead to sciatic pain.
That's bad.
So that would be if you have you can have an acute injury, you can have overuse injury, you can have a lot of things where you're doing way too much and it actually creates pressure on one side than the other.
Get that inflammation in there, it presses right on the nerve.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that happens too is if we are doing a ton of sitting, we're instantly putting compression into these lower lumbar and into the discs themselves.
So even if you have perfect posture while you're sitting, you are increasing pressure on those discs all the time. So I don't care how good your chair is. You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on an excellent chair. You're still compressing those discs.
And remember, the minute you sit down, you're loading almost 2 times your body weight onto your vertebrae. 2 times. That's a
with
lot.
Good posture.
Yeah, that's with us sitting upright and actually structuring and holding ourselves completely. This is why sitting is really not a great idea. So now we have the disc issue, right? So let's say that our posture is not that great. We're not doing as much sitting, but we're doing a consistent amount. It doesn't necessarily have to be that everything is compressing down into the vertebrae. It could be because we're sitting so much, our pelvis is now tipping anterior. Remember that anterior tilt where everything tips forward because the muscles are pulling the vertebrae or the pelvis forward? What will happen is as they pull this forward, the muscles are sitting right here into this guy, and as it tips forward, it's now compressing into the back even more. So you could have it postural distortion where the muscles from the front are way too tight and they're creating an impingement in the back, which is giving you sciatic symptoms, right? So it's not necessarily true sciatica, but it's compressing into that nerve and giving it sciatic symptoms.
I'm going to tell a little secret about myself. I know I seem like I am perfect. I know, right?
You do.
I'm not. There's those of us out there who are born with a little bit more of an anterior tilt.
Yeah.
As perfect as I seem, I do have that little anterior tilt, which predisposes me to having that pain.
Yeah.
And if I sit for any period of time, it already comes up. So we're going to talk about how to get out of this.
Well, and not only the anterior tilt, but if you have too much of a forward head and your shoulders drop forward, you actually go into what's called a flat back, which means the upper part of your back, it bends too far forward and it flattens this guy out. And so what it does is it just compresses everything on top of one another anyway, right? So you could have that from a herniated disc, a bulging disc. You can have degeneration into the vertebrae, which compress into the spinal nerve root. But what if you're just like, dude, I wasn't doing anything, and all of a sudden it just showed up? So a lot of times we can have it posturally, where you overload one side of your body more than the other. Let's say you had a lot of free time with all of the stuff that's going on, and you decided to dig a hole, or you decided to do gardening, or you decided to like start doing something a little differently, and you're doing one side more than the other. Now all of a sudden you're compressing one side because you're using and activating one side of this way more than the other. Then you stand up, and now you've shifted your entire weight onto the other side, and there you go, you've compressed that nerve root. There could be something like that as well. And then that's going to go down into your butt, or even down into your lower leg, or farther. You could have gone in and started working out with a trainer and done something completely different that you haven't done in a long time, and done legs, and then done legs, and then did legs because you're trying to get it in because you haven't done it anymore because the gym's just opened, or whatever the case is. And next thing you know,
a million scenarios of why
right,
this will come up. And it could just be emotional stress.
It absolutely can. It absolutely can. So the other thing too, you could be pregnant. You have a lot of belly weight in the front. It compresses into your low back. Bang, there goes the sciatic nerve.
Never been my problem.
Yeah, luckily. You could have what's called a lumbar stenosis, where you have the narrowing of the inside of your foramen. So the inside of your vertebrae, in between these big vertebral bodies, that's where the spinal cord hangs out. It's also where all the nerve roots come out. If you have a narrowing that's coming through and it starts to narrow the inside like this, you don't have a lot of movement, and then that actually can compress onto the nerve as well. The other thing that we can have is nerve entrapment. So we have nerve impingement when the nerve root gets impinged. It gets pinched in between two objects, like the vertebrae, or the vertebrae and the disc, and something compresses and impinges on it. You can have nerve entrapment because as that sciatic nerve comes down here, it's coming down and it's moving right here. You have this piriformis that's laying on top of it right here. So now the piriformis muscle is part of your glute muscle, and it's laying right on top of this sciatic nerve. And when this gets too tight, then it presses into that sciatic nerve, and then bingo bango, there you got pain going down your leg.
Exactly accurate. For those of you who are paying attention, the sciatic nerve goes under it, and sometimes through the muscle.
Sometimes. Yeah. More often than not, it goes under, but sometimes it goes through, and sometimes it goes over. Everybody is totally different. But more often than not, you're having this kind of an issue where that side piriformis, and you'll hear it called piriformis syndrome a lot of the time. And then this comes down into the pelvis and moves down. And so not stretching enough, overloading, having a muscle spasm in your glute, in your low back, can all give you sciatic symptoms as well.
That posture, come back to that posture. Mm-hmm. That'll be the cause of a lot of that piriformis syndrome.
Right. Other things that may cause sciatica, or may have a hand in sciatica, would be aging. Because as we age, remember, we start to shrink. Everything drops down. We lose that nice collagen that we were born with, and everything starts to degenerate. Even on the best of us, we start to degenerate. If our posture isn't all that great, we're pulling on one side more than the other, and we start to aspirate these discs, and that can lead to it.
It can also just be a simple irritation, creating more inflammation in the area. As soon as that inflammation calms down, things forget.
Yep. Being overweight, you guys, is not healthy for sciatica. Majority of us have a lot of more belly weight these days than we probably have before.
Just look at me?
I'm just saying. And that will create an imbalance in the pelvis as well. Diabetes. Diabetes will have a big impact on potentially sciatica because it goes right into the nervous system. And so anybody who has diabetes, you have to pay particular attention to your nerves, because they can go in and affect your feet, and that's where the sciatic nerve drops down and runs into. And that's rough. Not exercising regularly will be a big part of it too.
You got to keep your body lubricated and hydrated and moving.
Yep. And then wearing high heels, ladies, because it's not the heels themselves, it's the angle of the heels and what they do to this guy right here.
I find once I get out of those heels and I stretch a little bit, I'm fine. What?
So as the heels come in and tip your pelvis forward, they go in and compress into that sciatic nerve too. The other thing too, sleeping on the wrong kind of mattress. So we've got the whole Sleeping Beauty thing where you're on the P, or Goldilocks where one is too hard and one is too soft.
Sleep on the P.
And then you want to sleep right in the center. So you want to have one that is supportive, that doesn't sink in, but also one that isn't too hard for you as well. The other thing too is smoking. People don't really understand why smoking would lead to sciatic nerve pain, because smoking is also a dehydrator. So it comes in and it's got all the nicotine in it, but it also goes in and dehydrates every part of you. And remember, all the nerves have to run back and forth like this into the nerve sheath. The nerves are all covered with a nerve sheath, and it has to go back and forth for the nerve to fluidly move through. So if you are dehydrated because you have been smoking too much, your tissue doesn't allow for movement, sticky. And it gets very, very sticky, and then everything sticks. And then we don't have movement. What we have is pull, and then that pulls onto the nerve, and then you have your pain, your referral pain. So there's a lot of things that can cause sciatica. Right? Sciatica, it's just not one thing. If you're doing a ton of sitting, that's going to do a lot of compression, and it could just be a nerve entrapment. A lot. So here's what we get to do to help relieve the pain of sciatica. The key is to the inflammation that happens when there is compression on that nerve. The nerve gets irritated and inflamed. And when the nerve gets irritated and inflamed, or something is inflamed pushing on the nerve, it's sending a consistent signal down your leg. It's like, ow, 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 all the time. And then your body's just like, I cannot handle all of this pain all the time. And then that drives it back up. So the first thing we get to do is get the inflammation off of the area that it's impinged by. That usually means if your back is way too tight or it's a compression into the nerve, you want to find a place where you can actually decompress it to get off of that area. Laying on your belly, for a lot of people, is a good one, with pillow under your hips to create a space in the back. Some of us have to lay on our back with our knees up in a 90 degrees and hips up in a 90 degrees to get the pressure off of the back.
Works very, very well. I've had people who couldn't do that. They needed to lay on the pillow.
Yeah, and or depending on where it's coming from, in the front or in the back, you may have to lay in press because it might be impinging into the front a little bit more. But the big thing is get the inflammation down. Sometimes that's taking an anti-inflammatory. Sometimes it's taking icing. For a lot of people, really enjoy that. But a lot more often than not, if you can relieve pressure into the nerve, that sciatic pain will go away. Right?
Absolutely.
And so if for whatever reason you have heat, redness, swelling, any kind of fever or fluish feeling, that's the time you would want to go to the doctor.
You have a loss of strength in that leg too. Not just from the pain, but actually loss of mobility.
Yes.
You got to go in right away.
If you have any bladder or bowel incontinence, if you cannot hold yourself when you're never going to get to the bathroom, go to the doctor, because that's something very serious. So there are some times when you cannot wait and you must go to the doctor. If this is staying with you for exorbitant amount of time,
usually it should relieve in about 2 weeks on its own.
Yeah. So if it's staying into the month, then it's time to go get an MRI or get an X-ray. But more often than not, what sciatic pain will do is it's just once you get the pressure off of the nerve, i.e. stretching the piriformis, giving space into the area that is being compressed, getting more hydrated so that you actually can allow the body to move the way it is. You can use hot or cold packs. You can stretch. You can take over-the-counter medication. That should relieve it.
If this is something you've been dealing with on and off for a while, I've read that sometimes it happens several times a year for people. Mm-hmm. If that's happening, go get checked. Go get evaluated on your posture, on your body, where you're holding your body. Something is causing that.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you have to have that. Well, that's what I do every year. That's what happens. It doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Go get checked, because there could be some corrections we can do and show you some functional movements that can eliminate it completely.
And the other thing too, you guys, is with the sciatica, if it's not going away and it's just so painful that you cannot handle it, go into the doctor. Like, have the doctor prescribe you potentially some muscle relaxers and or some anti-steroidal medication to anti-inflammatories. So it's going to be more like your prednisone and whatnot, so that it'll really relieve a lot of the pain in there.
Off, so that you can get a handle on everything.
Because once you're in pain, the body will stay in pain, because it stays into that sympathetic nervous system where it's a fight or flight, and your body doesn't know how to relax, and it's the relaxation that you're going to get that's actually going to make the pain
It's
feel
keeping
better.
you up at night, you're not getting sleep. Go get something.
And every once in a while, you'll have that where it's necessary to have surgery. But surgery should be the last option. The last option, with the exception of if you cannot feel your foot,
extremes.
if you cannot put weight on your foot, if you all of a sudden lose strength, you lose bladder and bowel, you have incontinence, that is a go to the doctor right away, okay? But other than that, check your posture. See what you've done. See if you've overloaded yourself by doing something in the past 2 or 3 days prior. Check and see if you're doing too much sitting. Check and see if you are standing on one side more than the other. If you're sitting a lot for work, if you're kind of compressing down into that back, it might be as simple as changing your posture and changing what you're doing and changing your patterns, and that sciatica gets to go away.
Simple point of that. Exactly. Every 20, 30 minutes, stand up for at least 15 seconds. You can do anything for about 15 seconds. Just stand for 15 seconds, squeeze your butt, get up tall, and then you go right back to what you're doing. It's just as simple as that little change can make all the difference in your back.
Yep, 100%.
In your life.
And remember, it's usually not necessarily where the pain is coming from, because you may feel pain in your hamstring, in your glute, and in your calf. It's not the muscle that's irritated necessarily. The muscle will be irritated because the nerve irritates the muscle, because it innervates the muscle. So the muscle will be tight, but it's tight because of the nerve. So it's really figuring out where the start of it is, not where the end of it is. So if you just rub the calf, rub the hamstring, rub the glute, chances are you're probably not going to get it out. It's not go and sit on a lacrosse ball. It's please don't. It's not go and dig into it. It's really opening it up and stretching it and trying to decompress the area, if I can give you any kind of word of advice on that one. So sciatic nerve pain, such a pain in the butt. Such a pain in the butt. And I'm so sorry if you are experiencing anything like that. If you are, definitely check it out. Like, try to see what your body can do for it naturally. If you are experiencing times where you cannot walk on your toes or cannot pull your toes up and walk on your heels, if you have any kind of incontinence, go to the doctor. This is a bigger issue then at that point. If not, see what you can do as far as decompressing and getting off of your feet and getting out of the gym, and the workouts will wait for a little while you get everything healed.
And do everything you can to anti-inflammatory yourself. Like, stop eating the inflammatory foods, drink tons of water.
Hydrate. Of water. Yeah, hydration is key to everything. So I hope that helped. If you know anybody who is suffering from any type of sciatica or is just a pain in the butt, let them watch this video, and maybe this will help them not be. So I hope you guys had a great day, and we will see you guys all next Wednesday at 12:30 for the next installment of Tissue Talk.
Have a great one, guys.
Have a great one. Bye.